Hi, welcome to Stuck in the Middle, a podcast that focuses on the theme of psychology. My name is Palan, and today we will discuss the subject, the psychology of film acting. To do this, we have one of India's most accomplished actors, Miss Gautami Tadimalla, who has acted in about 130 films with all the mega stars of India, namely Shah Rukh Khan, Rajinikanth, Mohanlal, Kamal Hassan, Mammootty, whoever it is. And so we're going to have her talk about the psychology of film acting. So welcome, Ms. Gautami. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the psychology of film acting just to get started.
Thank you, Tansri Palan. It's lovely to be back on your show.
Thank you.
I think we always have such really nice, interesting
Thank you.
chats.
Thank you.
And yes, psychology of acting, and I really like the way they use it, psychology of acting rather than psychology of actors. I think that's a very, very important distinction to make because, like, each job, each career demands a certain kind of a mindset and a skill set from you. Acting is one that is literally, it's truly unique because it's something that's very personal. It's every actor's journey, and each film is a different journey.
Sure.
So it's even though it's a continuous journey of, say, I've been in the industry now almost 40 years, right? So you could say it's one journey, but actually every film I've done is a new project that starts from scratch to finish. So it's almost like starting a cycle of birth every film that you do. And then in our film industry, we have so many languages between the states, and also every time you shift from one to another, it's a whole new cycle. So the
Because
psychology of
because of the culture.
the culture, the language, the kind of films that are made, the kind of roles that you do. Like the kind of roles that I do in a Tamil film is very different from a Telugu, is different from a Malayalam. So it's totally different. So the mindset you have to adapt in each place are completely different, diametrically opposite sometimes. So it really becomes about the psychology of acting because what is the mindset that you create? What is the perspective with which you look at a completely new canvas each time? Different kinds of people. Like a unit in one language would have a completely different ethos.
Of course, yeah.
Other people will behave totally differently. So
Yeah.
sounds exhausting, but I think it's exhilarating.
But in the book, Masks of Faces of Acting, William Archer, he talks about the cognitive and emotional dimensions of film acting or performance. What are your thoughts on the emotional and the cognitive dimensions of acting?
I think the way that Indian cinema is structured today, the kind of films that are made, and this is coming from a very informed view of 40 years in the thick of things, mind you. Having that kind of an impact created on an actor or a creative person because of the content they're creating, be it a role or, film or whatever it is, happens when you are making a film that demands that of you. Whereas by and large, we are the world's largest filmmaking industry. And the majority of that is what we call mainstream commercial cinema,
Sure.
right? So from someone who's been born into that genre and grown up in that and, achieved what I have,
Sure.
I can say with complete respect and love for what I have done and what I continue to do is that in that genre of cinema, it's more about being a star and a personality and traversing that path rather than getting into the skin of every character, reinventing yourself, turning yourself inside out emotionally to create a character or get into another character's skin. So, and I would say in many ways, this is far more challenging because you begin to be one person within yourself with all your fears, your anxieties, your true desires, beliefs, everything, and then you have this external persona
Sure.
that you're pursuing because you have this idea of stardom and success that you are
Of course, you're the
fighting
mega
for.
star, right?
So they're two different things.
Right.
Mega stars and superstars and superhuman beings are at the core of them human beings. So there is a conflict there and there's a huge pressure to keep that up.
So you talked about commercial cinema, but here, of course, William Archer talks about the cognitive content. And then, of course, he talks about the emotional content. And I was visiting my daughter in Edinburgh, where she's doing psychology. And we're going to one of the large Tesco's, I think. And the driver was a Pakistani driver. And obviously, the first question was, "Are you from India?" I said, "We are from Malaysia, but of course, uh, we are an Indian
Yeah.
ethnic, but we are Malaysians." Yeah. And then he said, "Oh, have you seen this movie that Vijay Sethupathi acted in Maharaj?" So I was a little bit stunned because knowing the rivalry between India and Pakistan in cricket and everything else, it was a guy who was willing to watch a movie, and he said, "Oh, it was a lovely performance," he said. And then he said, "But what caught me was the screenplay because it was talking about the love of a father for a daughter." And so I just thought that was interesting. So how would you actually uh, kind of dwell on this debate that William Archer explores in his book? Is great acting a genuine emotional experience or is simulation? Do I simulate my voice, my body language? So, how would you actually see that?
I would say great performances are a mix of different things. One
Right,
is it has to start with great writing.
right.
It has to start with a director that really,
Sure,
really both knows and
sure,
demands the
sure.
best out of you. And someone who has lived and breathed his character so he can see it in three-dimensional completeness before even taking it out of you and putting it on screen, right? So that greatness has to start with that. Once that is done, the actors, part of that job comes from definitely talent,
Of course.
undoubtedly talent. There has to be a tremendous skill in what you do because acting, like any other skill profession, requires that sort of technical knowledge, if you want to call it. That's very, very important. Voice, body, language,
Yeah,
movement, all
yeah,
these kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
things. And but more than anything, there has to be the genuine joy in what one does. You have to love what you do, and you have to be like a child, with your first most beloved toy and doll, and your blankie. That is the kind of joy and attachment you need to develop to these roles, and
Sure,
they don't come along every day. But when they do, you have to see it, recognize it, fall in love with it, and give it everything you've got.
sure. But the skills can be learned, right?
Skills absolutely must be learned.
So, how would you rate then the importance of technique and authentic emotion? Because sometimes I've seen pictures from films where Omar Sharif is there, and I've seen great movies of Dilip Kumar in India or Amir Khan or Shivaji Ganeshan or something like that. And you sometimes think that it's technique coupled with that authentic emotion. But sometimes when you see a 007 movie, it's basically technique. There isn't any emotion. So, how would you actually take it into the context of psychology, acting? How would you see that?
See, I understand what you say when it's technique and it's not emotion in films like that, like these high octane thrillers and all that. I would beg to differ a little bit in that, as in, there is a strong element of emotion in that because you get so invested into the moment. It need not be intensely emotional or dramatic or anything like that, but it's definitely emotion. You get invested into it. You're rooting for the hero, and you want the villain to get knocked down. So you're definitely getting into it. So it is an emotional experience. That having been said, skills are a must.
Skills are a must.
Skill
Yeah.
set are a must. I mean, if I whatever I know today, I've learned the very, very hard way because in 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 almost every which way I am self-made. I came into the industry with no background of the film industry, acting, literally knew nothing. So I definitely owe a lot to the people who were generous with teaching me in the sense that they just let me be there. They weren't selfish with their craft. Nobody sat down and said, "This is how you do this, that is how you do that." Nobody taught me in that sense. But nobody ever hid their craft from me either. So I learned the do's, I learned the don'ts. And the thing is, I still am very,
You
very
learned by
hungry to learn.
observation or
Yeah,
learned from role models?
observation. See, it's I don't know about role models because when you work with so many people across such a vast spectrum of genres, languages, all kinds
Sure.
of parameters, it definitely becomes about I am even till today, and I will be always like a sponge. I'm just hungry to learn, to soak up, to I set myself a threshold. I get myself to that, and now when I know I've achieved that, that's gone. I said, what next? So that becomes again my starting point. It's a bit, I guess it
Right,
can be a bit
right.
exhausting when you look at it from outside, but it's exhilarating.
I watched a movie recently. I believe strongly from my background, whatever I've done, educator or entrepreneur, I was always believed that films have a responsibility, social responsibility. They must bring about social change because you educate and you're responsible for making society civilized. I didn't like that movie, but of course, one of the things that I liked in that movie was, of course, it was a commercial movie. The guy who plays the role of the bad guy basically talks to the main actor and he says, "Oh, Sare, nothing personal. It's purely professional." But that was a line that actually I took away from that movie. I always say, wow, he's able to bring about that difference, personal and professional. Because in the world of entrepreneurship, we sometimes mix these two. You take the personal dimension to the professional. And so how do you think we keep that away? Because even in another movie I saw recently, The Mehta Boys, I think it's Mr. Bomai Rani. He created a great performance as
He's a
a
wonderful
father,
actor.
wonderful actor. Then I started kind of having this concept in psychology affecting the transference and counter transference. I could just feel that I was in issues or something like that. So that's very powerful cinema.
Yeah.
But how do we actually get into the real versus the performed self? The real self versus the performed self? Because sometimes stars take it away as well. So is that because of the psychology of acting or is it something natural human behavior?
When you say take it away, what do you mean?
They take it on to their real lives. The congruence is missing. So, okay, I did something in cinema, but I take it away to the real life as well. So the public self and the private self becomes incongruent. They are no longer the same. Is it because something gets completely internalized in me that I lose the self? Or is it just a natural progression from? I would love to know this from someone who's been in the industry for 40 years.
Okay, so I see two questions in that. One is you were talking about, what is the role of cinema in terms of having a social
Yeah,
responsibility.
absolutely, absolutely.
Cinema has tremendous responsibility to hold up simply because it is the single most influential and most widespread mass medium
Sure,
for communication,
certainly.
right? So, whatever you communicate through cinema has the greatest potential and the greatest power to permeate a person's innermost thoughts. Because watching a film is not a group activity, it's very personal and very intimate. You might be one in the middle of 1,000 people in an auditorium, but when you're watching that film, it's just you and what you're seeing on the screen.
Exactly.
So, what you take away from that, what sinks into your head, what sticks with you, what inspires or what instigates you is between you and that film. So, there is tremendous responsibility in every film. I do not appreciate violence being glorified on film.
Of course, yeah.
Violence needs to be shown, but to the point where it is
Authentic.
shown in its ugliness.
Yeah.
I'm not even worried about authenticity because sometimes authenticity becomes an excuse for people to glorify it.
Okay.
Because now the protagonists are indulging in a lot of violence, extreme violence in Indian films. So I would like to see violence portrayed in a way that actually shows the ugliness, the futility, the tragedy of it. But otherwise, I would also like films and filmmakers and everyone involved in it to recognize the power that they hold in their hands, no matter how small, how seemingly insignificant it might be, so that should be there. And the next question is about a star and their identity, basically.
Exactly. It's an
Yeah.
identity crisis
Yeah.
sometimes.
I think the biggest issues or the danger there would come when a human being who gets thrown into a situation of extreme success on a superhuman, super normal, hyper normal plane of magnitude of success. The danger comes when they start believing it.
Mm.
That success is a function of their work, it's not their identity. Very, very, nebulous kind of a distinction between the two. You run a race, you win a first prize gold medal, you stand on the podium and the first prize, get that, get applauded, it's done. It's your achievement for that race. But you're not the greatest, or it does not, so it is an opportunity for you to prove yourself. But you always have to start with your feet on the ground.
So being grounded.
Very important.
I remember a conversation I had with my father maybe about 50 years ago. And he had just gone to see this great Tamil actor, Sivaji Ganeshan. And he said, "Wow, what a wonderful actor you are. Your acting is so good." And apparently Shivaji Ganeshan replied and said, "Well, what's so great about it? My whole life is now become one of acting." So my father said, it looked as though he was very emotional about it and he couldn't do what he wanted to do. So it was about the self. Yeah. So, Gautami, it was wonderful talking to you about the psychology of acting, but for the benefit of our actors, as we come to the last few minutes, if there's something that you would like our viewers to, they're not necessarily from the industry, but if you would like them to take away from this episode of the psychology of film acting, how would you rate it or relate it to life? Yeah. And because sometimes we talk about congruence,
Yeah.
and acting is always seen as not congruent.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, as a summary, would you want to say some things?
Absolutely. And I think I want to pick up that question, the answer to that question from what you last spoke about, is what is the relationship between a star and their success, right? And this is something that will appeal to or should resonate with everybody that watches non-film professionals as well. The danger comes when you get subsumed by either your success or you're hunting your success.
Right.
You always have to keep in mind, you always have to keep in perspective the fact that you were the one that started it. Your success is only an outcome of your work, your aspirations, your effort, your achievement. Your success is never bigger than you, and your success is definitely not who you are. So I've succeeded in one field, in one aim. I can do it in another because I made that happen the first time. So this is something that I think people should recognize, especially today, because there's so much pressure, so much peer pressure, so much social media pressure, there's so much pressure on deliverables, there's so much pressure on expectations. So it's not just easy, but I think people are very vulnerable now.
Sure. Yeah. Vulnerable.
Yeah, so I think one needs to be able to sit down, realize this. And I'm not saying this as a reality check, but I'm saying this as a matter of reassurance. Sit yourself down and say, hey, it's not only just okay, it's amazing because I'm doing great.
But for reality check, would it help if you had a father figure, a mentor, a mother, a guide, a coach to say, look, let me walk with you on this journey? And so give them a balanced perspective in life so that they stay grounded.
I've and probably one reason I am who I am is because my family has just been my family. Nobody's head is ever turned because I'm supposedly a star or a celebrity. But I think that is basically who we are. But then what you said about having a mentor or a guide or somebody, I think the greatest value people can add in your life is just being there because they want to be there for you.
Of course,
No strings attached.
of course.
Not I did this for them or I do this for her
No
or I am that to him. When you have people in your life who are simply there because they want to be in your life for you, I think that's the greatest value that you can derive from another human.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Likewise.